record on this computer. Okay, so now we're starting to look at the Psalm, Psalm 116. And let's see, I believe Carrie Malone is going to proclaim that for us.
Yes, Father.
Okay.
I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living.
I will walk
I
before the
will
Lord in the
walk
land of the
before
living.
the Lord in the land of the living.
I believed, even when I said, I am greatly afflicted. Precious in the eyes of the Lord is the depth of his faithful ones. O Lord,
I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living.
O Lord, I am your servant. I am your servant, the son of your handmaid. You have loosed my bonds. To you I will offer sacrifice of thanksgiving, and I will call upon the name of the Lord.
I
I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living.
My vows to the Lord I will pay in the presence of all his people, in the courts of the house of the Lord, in your midst, O Jerusalem.
I will walk before the Lord
in the
land of the living.
Okay, so let's share any words or phrases or images that struck us while Carrie was proclaiming that text. Be sure to unmute yourself if you're going to say something.
Precious in the eyes of the Lord.
Land of the living struck me.
I believed even when I was said I am greatly afflicted. It's easy to believe when things are all going great, but like the last few days, it gets harder.
Okay, I'll move on. First, I'll begin with a remark on psalm numbering. Back before chapter numbers and verses were inserted into the Bible, many of the ancients considered Psalm 116 to be two different psalms. The first 9 verses in the Greek and Latin tradition are Psalm 114, and verses 10 to 19, that's Psalm 115 in the Greek and Latin tradition. Our psalm today begins with verse 10 of the Hebrew, and that same verse begins the new psalm in the Greek and Latin tradition. The response that we used, I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living, is actually verse 9. That is the last verse of the previous psalm in the Greek and Latin tradition. Let's see. The land of the living is the land above ground, as opposed to the grave. The psalmist, like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, Isaiah, and over 99% of the people in the Old Testament, I said 95, but it's probably 99, has no hope of life after death. The psalmist is thanking God for prolonging his life. About 160 years before Jesus, some Jews started to believe in resurrection of the dead. Others began to believe that the human soul was immortal. Some of them eventually began to interpret the land of the living as referring to life with God after this life. After the resurrection of Jesus, this interpretation became very common in Christianity. So sometimes it's hard for us to remember that walking in the presence of the Lord in the land of the living, originally this didn't mean walking around heaven with God. The translation of verse 10 is difficult, and I give you how each phrase in verse 10 can be translated. It can be, I believed, or I do believe, or I will believe. Even when, or indeed, or therefore. Then I said, or I say, I am greatly afflicted, or I was greatly afflicted. Any combination of these columns is a valid translation. There are 24 possibilities there, probably more, some I've left out. A minor issue is when the belief occurred, occurs, or will occur, and when the affliction occurred or is occurring. How one renders the tenses of the first verse affects how one renders the tenses in the following verses. So that's a minor problem. Diane Bergant points out the main issue. Most English translations state that the psalmist's faith remains in spite of affliction, even when I said I was greatly afflicted or I am greatly afflicted. But here, the Hebrew can mean that it is precisely because of constant faith that the psalmist can speak of affliction. I do believe, therefore I say, I'm greatly afflicted, or therefore I say, I was greatly afflicted. I couldn't even talk about this unless I do believe. In our liturgical context of the psalm and its response, after the first reading, we can imagine this as a prayer of Isaac, thanking God for sparing him. He was greatly afflicted when he was about to be slain by his father, but his death was precious in the eyes of the Lord. That is, too precious for the Lord to allow him to die. I am your servant, the son of your handmaid. The psalmist compares himself to a slave that's born into the family. He has no right to expect freedom. And these words really do not apply to Isaac. He is the wife, he is the son of the free wife, Sarah. Ishmael, his half-brother, was the son of the servant wife, Hagar. These words would apply more to Ishmael, actually, than to Isaac. You have loosed my bonds. The psalmist compares himself to a servant who has been granted freedom. We can imagine Isaac saying these words in a very different sense after Abraham untied him. You have loosed my bonds. Paying vows to the Lord is the theme of the last part. In his difficulty, the psalmist had made vows to the Lord. If the Lord helped, he or she would offer sacrifices to the Lord. The psalmist is going to do this in public, in the presence of all his people, in the courts of the house of the Lord, in your midst, O Jerusalem. Note the synonymous parallelism that emphasizes this. Now, the Jerusalem sacrificial system of the psalmist, there's a typo. That sacrificial system begins about 800 years after the time of Abraham. Liturgy tends to conflate thematic ideas in an ahistorical sense. The first reading mentions Abraham as offering a private sacrifice of a lamb. Nobody else is there except for Isaac. So when they finally offer that lamb. No mention, furthermore, little electric problem. I hope my internet didn't go down. Let's see. Okay. Entering power save mode. I hope I'm still there. Oh, goodness. Come on back. Okay. I'm still recording. I'm still recording. I hope you're there. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. Okay.
Well, I've just lost Father Pat. Can anybody
Okay.
else hear me?
Okay. I'm back on now. I'm back on. I'm hoping all that disruption was because the power came back on and my generator cycled off. I don't know what's going on right now, but let me keep on going. So the first reading mentions Abraham as offering, or excuse me, a private sacrifice of a lamb. No mention is made of Isaac taking part in this sacrifice. The focus of the author of Genesis is on the faith and obedience of Abraham, not the role of Isaac. And this is very different from the way a modern author or a modern film director would handle the scene. We all want to know what was Isaac's response to all of this. So at this point, I'll be quiet, and any questions, comments, or observations on the psalm here. Be sure to unmute yourself before you chime in.
Father Pat.
Yes, Dr. John.
Are you saying that it was only after 800 years after Abraham that they started the typical temple sacrifices?
Approximately, yes. That the temple was built by King Solomon, and he lived about 950 AD, and Abraham, they usually date him around 1800 BC. So the temple. Now, according to the tradition, the Israelites began the sacrificial system at the time of Moses, which would be about 500 years after Abraham. And during the time of the judges, they had various places where sacrifice was offered. And finally, the temple in Jerusalem was built, and that was the only legal place to offer sacrifice during the time of David and Solomon. And then after the northern kingdom broke away, they went back to the older idea of having other places besides. I'm having more trouble with, I hope I'm still up and running. Okay, goodness. Okay, I'm still there. Okay, thank you, Dr. John. I'm gonna, let's see, while we still have a little bit of power and everything, I'm gonna ask Pat Davis to read the psalm again. Are you still, I see you're still with us, Pat. So I think I am. Okay. Every time it cycles, my computer thing goes crazy. Go ahead and read. Go ahead and read if you can get on, Pat. Even if I get kicked out of the meeting electronically, please go ahead and read the psalm. Pat Davis. Please unmute yourself. Okay, I'm back. Did the psalm get read? Goodness. I see Holly's there. Is everybody out? But let's. Okay. There's other people. Did you read the psalm? I'm back. The good news. Okay. Okay. Let's do what is the good news and what is the challenge that we're hearing from the psalm? What is the good news and the challenge? Oh, we're still recording. Your internet connection is unstable, it says. Surprise, surprise. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording on this.